Hey everybody, today I got this package in that has some steel from Gambler Custom on Instagram, and it's some chain link San Mai. And the outside is some stainless steel, and then the core is W2. I think I'm going to make a little cheese knife out of it, so I'm going to sketch it on with some pencil. Here's the finished design. It has around a 4-inch blade and just over a 4-inch handle. First thing I'm going to do is to cut out the rough profile on my portable bandsaw, and I have that mounted in a swag off-road table with some bimetal blades. Once the rough profile is cut out, I move over to my grinder and start profiling it using a worn out 36 grit shredder belt from Combat Abrasives. I like to use the flat platen to shape all of the flat surfaces, and then once I'm done doing that, I swap over to a small wheel attachment to get inside the finger grooves. Once the rough profile is cut out, it's time to drill some holes into the tang for weight reduction and pinholes. I start by doing the main pinholes using a bit that's just over a 1/4 inch, I think it's 17/64, and then I swap over to an even larger bit to countersink those holes. The last hole I drill is in the front of the blade so that you can hang it up, and I do that with an 8mm drill bit. Here's a nice little slow-mo that you can see the chips flying out of the steel. Here I'm just putting on a rough bevel before heat treat just so that I have a little bit less material to remove after heat treat. I'm heat treating this at 1475 degrees inside my even heat kiln, and then once it's up to temperature I hold it there for around 10 minutes and then I quench into Parks 50 oil. The ideal temperature range for Parks 50 is around 70 to 80 degrees, so I always make sure to heat up my oil when it's really cold outside, just so that it stays in that range. Here I'm just doing a quick file test to make sure that the edge got hardened, and it skates across so it looks like it's nice and hard. And here's the knife after tempering twice for 2 hours at 400 degrees. To do the final bevels, I like to put on a fresh 60 grit belt, and I like to continuously dip the knife into my water bucket below the grinder just to prevent heat from building up in the edge. Once I have the edge pretty thinned out, I swap over to a 120 grit ceramic belt before changing to an A100 Trizact and then an A45 Trizact. Trizact belts are my personal favorites for doing the final polish on a bevel, just because they leave me with a really nice surface finish. I also sometimes like to do surface conditioning belts like Scotch-Brite belts, but on this one I didn't do that. If you catch the blade in the right light, you can already start to see the pattern start to pop out. One way I like to test the thinness of my edges is to run my thumbnail behind the edge, and if the edge deflects a little bit and then springs right back into place, the edge is nice and thin. Now that it's time to etch the blade, I first degrease the blade using some dish soap and water. Into the ferric chloride acid we go. I'll leave it in there for around 5 minutes just to get some depth and color. And my favorite part, seeing the pattern revealed. After that, I just neutralize it with some baking soda water and then put a light coating of oil on it. The handle material I'm using on this one is some marble resin that really complements the colors in the blade. Here I'm just using my drill press to drill some 1/8 inch pinholes. I then attach the handles onto the knife using some G-Flex epoxy and some clamps. Once the glue is cured overnight, I start shaping the handle on my grinder. I usually use a worn out 60 grit belt on this, just because the resin's easy to shape and doesn't need a fresh belt. I generally start by shaping one side of the handle, and then move to the other side and make sure that the symmetry between both halves is equal. Once the handles are roughly shaped, I start blending everything together by hand, starting at 320 grit sandpaper, and then I move up through 600, 1000, and finally 2000. The 2000 grit sandpaper will leave you with a really high polish finish, but if you want a really glass-like sheen, you can then buff it with something like Hut plastic polish. Next, I'm just going to etch my name onto the back of the knife using some electrolyte solution and my etching machine. The very last thing to do is sharpen the knife. I like to do this on the belt sander, and I actually have a whole video showing my process, so go ahead and check that out here above if you're interested. I basically set the edge using a 120 grit belt before taking it up to 400 grit, and then stropping it on a leather strop like this one that's loaded with some diamond spray. Now it's time to test it out on some hard Parmesan and then some softer cheese. Goes through like butter, or like cheese. And here's the finished knife. I'm super happy with how the color of the handle almost perfectly matches the color tones in the blade, and the patterns in both look really nice. Hope you guys also like the way the knife turned out, and let me know if you have any questions or comments in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. Stay sharp.